The Honest Garage Podcast, where real shop owners tell real shop stories.
Today on the Honest Garage Podcast, we're talking with a guy who went from wrenching in the shade of a giant tree in front of his parents' house at 16 to running a busy auto and diesel operation in the heart of downtown Mesa, Arizona. And he's still experimenting with new ideas 15 years in. Preston Callahan is the owner of Callahan Auto and Diesel and Callahan Auto and Diesel Fleet and RV Repair in Mesa, Arizona. His operation's grown from a one-man driveway gig into multiple locations, a general repair and light diesel shop with multiple bays, and a separate arm focused on 24-hour emergency roadside service for trucks and RVs. Preston started Callahan Automotive at just 23 years old, working out of his parents' driveway, and then moving into a 1,850 square foot shop, and now into more than 10,000 square feet as the work and reputation have grown. Those first years were the classic grind, 10 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week, powered by a mix of stubbornness, skill, and the feeling of being too far in to back out now. What makes Preston stand out is his willingness to keep evolving. He's brutally honest about the tension between being a great tech and being a great business owner. And he's constantly tweaking the model, separating business lines, thinking different about how to market the truck and RV side versus the auto side, and wrestling with the balance between having enough work and having enough people to do the work. In this episode, we're going to dig into how he went from a 16-year-old turning wrenches in a driveway to a multi-location operator, what it's like to live in two very different corners of the automotive world, and how he keeps pushing forward when a lot of people would have tapped out years ago. Preston, welcome to the Honest Garage Podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, David. Thanks for having me, man.
Good. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. I know that we had a really good conversation on our prep call getting ready for today's show. And one of the things that I like to do is start out the show with an easy softball question of like, you know, what's the car that got you into this industry or the truck? What is it that you loved that drew you in to begin with?
Well, knowing something that everyone around me didn't know anything about, and knowing that, hey, I kind of had a hack for it, and then I'm like, okay, well, hack, knack, whatever you want to call it. And but yeah, that's kind of what drew me in. And well, between that and also, I didn't have my first vehicle. Had a tow at home. My dad towed me with a tow strap on a Jeep Comanche with the transmission in the back, and all I can see is where the shifter would be in the ground. And so I'm like, well, I gotta fix it to drive it. And so it was kind of like a little bit of necessity, a little bit of, I could actually make this thing work. And then it was hooked.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we all start. That first car, you figure out like if you have what it takes to even be interested in this.
Oh yeah. I had a lot of interest before that. I did I think it was 6th or 7th grade. Did a project demonstration on an internal combustion engine and tore my dad's lawnmower apart and never got it back together. But I knew what the pieces were, and yeah.
And you're good at putting things back together now, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the years less and less, spare bolts around, and so yeah.
That's awesome. So I know you started building the shop out of your parents' driveway, and now you've got the full operation, separate locations, 24-hour roadside service. When you look back at the early years, though, what was it that kept you from walking away? What were the key decisions that got you out of the driveway and kind of into where you're currently at now?
I mean, I would say at that point, it was the biggest one was, it didn't feel like any other options. And I didn't want to go backwards. And I felt like I had a talent. I was staying busy and I was trying to apply because I worked full time out of my parents' driveway for 2 years full time. And when I say full time, I mean 4 cars in the driveway, 2 in the rocks, 3 or 4 in the street, a couple around the corner, all the parts trucks going like crazy in front of us. So, and when I couldn't find a job that was kind of what I was used to making, or utilizing the skill that I was continually building, even till now, you're still continuing building skills. That's why I'm like, okay, well, let's try this, shall we? And kind of go into it.
Yeah. So from that like initial let's try this phase to getting out of the driveway and into the first location, tell me about that first kind of leap of faith, if you will, in your business, and what drove that. What can people learn from what you learned at that time?
Well, I this is one thing I never got used to is let's just say, yeah, it's exciting to get in there off the get go. But then the first month goes around and you get that, at a young age, get the first commercial grade bills and rent and all that stuff to pay. And you go, okay. All right. Now there's a lot more than just me renting on cars and for a little bit of side money. Like this is it. And so it's buckled down and we got to rock and roll because and the bills just got bigger. And that's what's just one thing, no matter how long you do this, they never get the shock and awe, like, holy crap, never goes away.
Yeah. I think that a lot of techs really struggle when we turn it from a hobby into a business. You start to realize why, we're not charging $60 an hour, $50 an hour in this business. Mm-hmm. When you start to add the overhead and the software cost and the footprint of a shop and the equipment costs and everything onto that. And I know that transition can be hard for customers who transitioned with you from the time you were in the driveway to the customers who are still with you today. How did you kind of manage those expectations for customers through that transition? As I'm sure your labor rate was probably increasing at that time.
Well, and it didn't increase fast enough, and because it's one of those things where you're blowing and going as a tech. Because when you start a business, and most people when they start a business, they're the ones that have the magic. They know what to do, how to do it. They're going to be really good at it. But when you come in in the mechanic world, you're either a really good mechanic or you're a really good business owner, and
right,
you're not best of both. So. But as I was trying to, because when you start doing this, you have to start bumping rates. You the whole time you're like, oh my God, I'm screwing people over right now. That's what it feels. Well, but that's why you got to build up your service. Have your service justify what's going on, and it's always skill building. Like I was saying, you're always learning something. I mean, every day I'm learning a new skill to talk to a customer, or a new way to help organize the company a little bit more, separate us apart of like, this is why you come to me, because I can offer this, we do this is how we do it. And so it's a balancing act. It seems like you're juggling all the time between parts margins, labor margins, techs, and running the business, doing the sales. And I mean, there's so many steps in the whole process. It's insane.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you're not prepared for it and you don't understand your numbers, you don't understand profit margin, you don't understand the parts margin, the labor margin, all of the rest of it, it makes it almost impossible to succeed. And with that, you mentioned that you should have raised the rates sooner. And it's for those out there that are listening to the show, I know that there's a lot of self-limiting beliefs around what you can charge and what you should charge. And I'm curious, what's your advice to people out there who are kind of in that boat? What would you say to them at this moment?
Well, so I didn't. I mean, there's so many people that say, "Oh, bump your labor rates," or "Oh, you got to charge more on parts," and just that like that's not the key. You know what I mean? And the reason why I say I wasn't raising it fast enough is I didn't know my numbers fast enough. And so, because when you get into this, you go from, again, if you can be a great mechanic, you're going to be a horrible business owner. So you need to work and try to educate yourself to try to be a better business owner. Just like the whole thing that everyone says is, you got to work on your business, not in your business. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. Yeah, I've been hearing those things for years. And I mean, 15 years in the business, I just started doing that a couple of years ago. And usually it's not okay, I feel like I need to do this. No, there's something that has to kick you in the ass and go, okay, I have to do this now. I have to be sustainable. Like especially now I have 2 kids and a wife, and I had that reality kick going, okay, wow, if I'm not here pumping the heart physically all the time and driving this crazy business model I've built, if something happens to me, it's hurting not just my family, it hurt a lot of families. And so that's what that awakening was to, okay, now I have to do this. So as I started, you're okay, fixing cars, and then you just hope at the end of the month, okay, cool, there's like $200 left, right on. And you start realizing that you're like, okay, well, why? Okay, do I have to do this? And yeah, you can buy all these programs and all that, but how do you learn? You still have to know what you're looking at, just like a scan tool. You can plug it in. It doesn't just tell you what's going on. You have to decipher what you're looking at, what kind of PID data you're looking, and which way you're going to go. And so it's a balancing act. There's a lot of different aspects to it. And it's definitely much easier said than done. And saying that hey, I want to be a business owner, I want to jump in and do this, and that's the easy part. That is the most simplest part. 100%.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to build yourself a job. It's really hard to build yourself a company.
Oh, 100%.
And I think you're building yourself a really interesting business model. You're really running two very different businesses within the automotive space under the Callahan name. And I'm curious, how did the second shop come about? How do you mentally and operationally separate the two worlds? How do you bring them together? Walk us through that a little bit.
So we'll start off by saying ADHD is insane, and that's first and foremost. And yeah, I interconnected it and made it rock and roll, and just okay, here you go, but didn't quite know how to tie it all together. Now I'm trying to tie up the loose ends on the back end to make it stronger and actually stabilized, because before it was just way more work than it was. It's definitely working harder, not smarter. And but when you're in the midst of it and go and not working on the company, that's what it is. You just built yourself really start adding up all the time. You built yourself the most lowest paying job in your entire business that you just built.
Yeah, you're paying yourself about $4 an hour.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. And so I had my base shop for general repair and light duty diesel, and then we started the emergency roadside trucks. And so the second shop, it didn't come out of, I didn't want a second location. I just wanted to be strictly mobile over there, for the best case of, don't have to pay rent in two spots. But the contractor yard I was working out of, they were closing it down, and we had to find a place to go. And the only place I could find a place that will accept automotive repair, and especially heavy duty diesel, which is very hard to find a home for. It was either this location that was way bigger and more expensive than I wanted to be, or it was going to be like 30, 40 miles away in the hood. And that's like, okay, well, you got to weigh the juice worth the squeeze. And so we went this way, and we're like, okay, I guess we're doing this now. And let's start going. Hang on, let's make it happen.
Yeah, I think that it's really hard to just kind of quantify for people that make it happen gene, that FitFo gene. We kind of have to just figure it out. And that's what our teams all rely on us to do in the industry. And earlier, you made a comment that I want to bring back up. You said when you're a good tech, you're oftentimes a shitty businessman. And when you're a good businessman, a lot of times you're a shitty tech. What did that tension look like with your own story? And what are the really specific things that you had to stop doing as a tech to become a better businessman? And how have you transitioned? How have you seen your growth from tech to businessman over your 15 years?
Well, when you first start, again, there's a lot of, when you're a business owner, you're a problem solver. You're solving, and especially if you're tech, you're solving a problem for a customer, but you're also solving problems within the company and the business you're constructing or putting together. And it doesn't matter what scale it is, you're going to run across problems you're going to have to fix all the time. And you can, like, I didn't go to school for this. I have a business degree from Google. Just Google it, like, okay, how do I do this and whatever. And just like when it comes to sales tax, it's like you blink, you're like, oh, I was supposed to pay those every month. Okay, how am I going to afford it? Is that because I wasn't charging enough? I didn't have my stuff balanced together. And so, did I know it at that time? No. Did I cross a ginormous wall and I was like, oh crap, I need to make some changes and do this? Yeah. So if I didn't know something, I'd go until it became a problem or slapped me in the face or whatever. And it's like, okay, now I have to shift. I have to learn how to do this now. And okay, let's not do this again. And then you're good for a while, then you get to another level or you start, climbing back up, and guess what? What you had going now doesn't work. And so it's like, holy crap, let me do this all over again. And you get more employees, more problems. The bigger you get, more problems. And finally it gets to the point where it's like, okay, well, now I have a wife and family, and well, I can't have it consume all my time like it did before. I don't have a 24-hour clock now to figure this out and to work and 100 plus hours a week and whatever. And so it forces you to make changes or whatnot. So again, a lot of the stuff that, I maybe heard about, I knew about or whatever, but you don't realize it or really know about it until you reach it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an important distinction for the younger business owners out there to recognize that the business can only level up when you level up personally as an owner. And
Mhm.
that involves a lot of growth work. And I'm curious, for you learned kind of from the school of hard knocks, you learned from the Google school of business by just Googling things. Did you find any resources along the way that you think would be valuable for people who are in that stage right now where they know they need to level up, but they don't know where to look yet? Can you shorten somebody's learning curve here?
Well, I mean, I mean, my wife likes it. I fold all the laundry and do all the dishes because that's my time to, have Bluetooth in and I'm listening to podcasts. And, I don't listen to just automotive. I listen to all business because one thing I've found over the years, all business is the same, just different product and service. So you start learning different methods or tactics or ideas and whatnot, and you got to do it all the time. Anytime that there's like a training of any type of sales training or whatever, go there because yeah, you may have 5 hours of your time wasted, but if you learned one thing or can apply one thing, it wasn't wasted. Because one thing I found out is and this is why I'm not a book reader. So everyone says, oh, you got to read books. I just don't read books. I do audiobooks. I do podcasts and listen to, videos and documentaries of business owners in the past and all that stuff, just hearing what they did and their mentality. But a lot of times you'll hear some good advice that you need to adopt in your business, but it's not on your radar because it's not a problem at that time. And so that's why you got to keep doing it and just keep learning. Because one thing that this little white noise that you maybe heard in a video 2 years ago, maybe was the right piece of the puzzle that you have a problem with right now, but you weren't paying attention to it then because it wasn't a problem then. I always filter out, like I can hear all this stuff going on and it's like, oh, okay, ting, 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 some key words. Yeah, I'm relating to this right now. I'm feeling this right now. And so there's so much. I mean, heck, even when I started, I mean, the everything's came so much farther away, further, advanced when it comes to technology and resources available and all these things going on out there. And so, I mean, from 2010 to now, things have changed in 15 years.
Absolutely. And speaking of that time gap, one of the things that really stuck out to me about you was you're 15 years in and you're still open to trying new things. Right now, like, you're interested in separating the business lines more clearly between the two businesses, like thinking about different domains, reworking how you're approaching marketing and hiring and the capacity problem. For the other owners listening who feel stuck in the same pattern year after year, because business can feel cyclical if you let it, how do you decide what ideas are worth testing, and how do you test them without blowing up what's already working? How do you find that balance?
Well, again, going back to the ADHD thing, it's pretty easy to come up with a bunch of just random, what the hell kind of ideas. And then, okay, let's try this. Let's test run this. How does this look? What would this do? Thinking, okay, if I change this, how is this going to roll out? Because especially in the automotive industry, compared to a lot of other industries, number one, we have technicians that, they say, oh, my box has wheels for a reason. And, they can quit a job in the morning and have one at lunch if they're a good tech. And so, we have that there. We have, the economy and all the geopolitical stuff going on affecting our parts and availabilities and all the tech rising. I mean, we're like doctor's offices nowadays. And so, it's you got to, we always have to be in that. I mean, just keeping up with technology and vehicles nowadays and special tools and trainings and all that, we're already being adaptable, but you're adaptable for fixing something, but you're not adaptable to try to fix your own business. And so, we got to use the same type of tools and understand that, things are changing out here. We got to change something in here. And not everything is, something that'll work for one business isn't going to work for the other business. Something that I do may, completely crush another shop. You know what I mean? And so it's really about like, okay, what's your core goals? Where are you trying to take this, and where are you trying to go? And that's one thing that I didn't figure out until a couple of years ago. And you don't really have that answer that true answer until you start working on the business, not in the business. And what I mean by that is, okay, the whole time, all these years, so it's like, what's your goal? I'm going to rail this sucker as big as I could possibly get. I'm going to make all this money and, this and this and this, blah, 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 and then you have a family and this and this. And then the world's telling you, nope. What else do you got? Let's fine tune this, because now you have to. And so it changes. And so it's like, okay, now it's all about sustainability and stability. So I'm not, something happens to me, or if I want to step away from my family and do something, the business doesn't stall or do the death spiral going down. And so it really depends on, there's a lot of techs out there that they want to start their own business. That's how a lot of them get started. But they don't realize the ins and outs of how difficult it really is and what they're really stepping into. And sometimes that's fine, but don't hate the player, hit the game. If you jump in there if you step in there with too big of expectations, it's going to crush you. Period, in a story. Because it could be good and exciting for a year or two, but then, as things again start leveling up or changing or different dynamics happen, you're going to, everyone's going to hit walls. And it's just how you scale that wall, how you, get around that barrier and try to prevent it from happening again. That's what really separates them, in my opinion, the businesses that last and that can recover in hard times versus the ones that just disappear.
Well, so what are one or two things? You mentioned kind of leveling up, and you mentioned trying to work on the business and not in the business. And I'm curious if you have like one or two specific things that really helped you take leaps forward, not steps forward in your business, that you'd be willing to share with anybody that's listening to this right now.
Well, I would say my biggest one that I went through, it was more of a personal thing. Again, I mentioned the ADHD, and I didn't know I had ADHD until our son, it was like, oh, he was having school issues. And then, so as a father, I'm like, well, let me try this medication first. I want to make sure, number one, I was like, I'm related to him, like a lot of stuff, issues he was having in school. I'm like, that sounds familiar to me. And so, because it wasn't really anything big back then, and so when I tried it, I was like, holy crap, I can actually focus on something now. Before I mentally could not, focus like that. I can get ideas going. I can work harder than anyone around me, and I can put it in hours, and the amount of nicotine and caffeine is ridiculous. I can't believe I'm alive right now. But, so at that point, that was my biggest one, is just the, ability to actually follow and look at a problem and, focus enough to be able to solve it, not get distracted or try to, for years, I was trying to perfect or work on 50 things at one time. And so at that point, it's like, okay, I'm literally taking like 1 or 2% effort on each one. I'm never going to get anything done. But that's the whole thing of ADHD. So I would say that's my biggest one. The second one is just the want to take care of my team and the want to stay around for a long time. Again, that whole there's that long haul. Like I've been blown to go on these years. Do I want it just to disappear? No, I want it to stay around for a minute. You know what I mean? Let me feel like a freaking business owner. Like, all these people are talking online, like, oh, it's so great. You make your own schedule. I'm like, I haven't felt any of that for 15 freaking years. What the hell am I doing wrong? And so, it kind of pisses you off. Like all these people tell you all the good stuff. They don't dig in deep and tell you, no, it's a pain in the ass, and so, so that's where I'm like, okay, I just need to find instead of just balls to the wall, just trying to rip it as big as I can. Let me get to a point now. Let me just stabilize where I'm at. I have enough irons in the fire. Let me just, fine tune it and structure it and make it a little more steady and rebuild my foundation so I don't topple over. And
the theme I'm hearing as you're talking is intentionality. I think it's this idea of, and thank you, by the way, for opening up about the ADHD. I have a feeling that most entrepreneurs out there, if we were to get tested, would probably all test on that spectrum somewhere,
Oh, absolutely.
some higher than others. But I do think that it's a really important conversation to have about, from the healthcare side, obviously not as healthcare professionals, but if you think that you might have it, there could be some benefit in going and getting tested.
Oh, absolutely.
But really, what you got out of that sounds like the intentionality and the ability to stay focused on two or three things as opposed to focusing on everything across the board. And for me, I think that for anybody else out there listening, as a business owner, there's a million things to think about all the time. But we really have to focus on prioritizing those high leverage opportunities within our business. You could focus on solving how to make the oil change more efficient, perhaps in your shop, or you could focus on driving more customers to your shop or having a better facility or better SOPs in place. One of those things is probably higher leverage than the other. And I think for anybody out there listening, what I'm taking away, what I think would be a good takeaway from what Preston said there is that focus on the things that are high leverage that are going to move the needle for your business and allow you to then focus on your team so that they can help move the needle for your business and you're not the only one rowing the boat. Does that sound fair?
Oh, 100%. I mean, here's a prime example. I mean, anyone that's been in business or heck, even, I mean, who hasn't been in a situation where someone tries to do something for you, ask them to do it. You're like, no, it's okay. I got this. You know what I mean? Hold my beer. Watch this. You know, like, hey, just, no, don't, you want it done right. You know, those type of things. I mean, that's a prime example of what not to do when you own a business. And it's a very hard one to do because you're the one that has, all the skin in the game, everything into it. You're taking all the risk. You have the most magic. There's not one employee you can hire that's going to give a crap as you do. And so it's really hard to, go through those paces of, because when you trusting someone to do this or give them, teach them the skills and what they need to be able to do this efficiently so you don't have to do it. And that was the hardest freaking thing for me to do. So yeah, I'm sitting here over 100 hours a week. No, I got this. I'll do this tonight. And it's like midnight. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting it done. How is that sustainable? No one's learning it. And then they just expect you to do it. And so it's a vicious cycle that just starts recreating itself.
Well, an example that you just said there, I think that is high leverage, kind of goes back to that old Chinese proverb, right? If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, if you focus on training, then you can feed him for life. And what we're trying to do with our techs and our businesses is teach them to fish so that they can actually help you grow your business and not just become, we can't get stuck in that spiral of, nah, I got it. I can do this on my own. It's easy as a business owner sometimes to throw everything on your own shoulders, I feel like, instead of.
I mean, we're the best fishermen in the entire company, but we're trying to feed the village and we're doing all the work. 100%. Yeah. And so it's, again, there's that vicious cycle, man. And so that's where the having the self-talk, like where I want to go, where I need to do, and where to put the extra effort into. And again, it's easier said than done because you're like, I have work to get done to be able to make the money to be able to afford to do this. And again, there's a problem. There's a very big logistical problem, and that we have to figure it out. And some people literally can't. And until you find something, you're like, oh wow, this magic pill, fantastic! It can do this. And because if I could, but at the same time, if I had this figured out and was on medication back then, I'd probably only have one portion of the business, and that's it. Or may not even start a company. Honestly, having that fear that if I think too far into it for the risk. And it keeps a lot of people too from starting their own business, which is fine. You know what I mean? You're never going to turn a little side gig that you only do part-time into a big job unless you just say, I'm committed to it all and you have to make it work. The world needs awesome employees as well. So it's not there for everybody.
Well, and I appreciate the transparency, and it really kind of leads me into something that we ask everybody on this show, obviously, with the Honest Garage podcast. And, I'm the owner of Honest Mechanic Marketing. The word honesty is really important to us here on the show. And I'm curious, when you hear the phrase honest mechanic or honest shop owner, honest garage, what are the things that come to mind for you personally? How does that show up in the way that you do business, the way that you hold yourself?
Can they talk the talk and walk the walk? That's the first thing. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And, because that's kind of how everyone is, and everyone puts you under a spotlight. Everyone says that, I'm honest and this and this and this, but there's not too many platforms, especially like how you're doing this, how this conversation is just kind of, let loose without like a built-in itinerary or back in like, message or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, no one wants to talk about the bad things. They don't want to talk about, the what ifs or anything like that. Everyone wants the high hopes and dreams and have a Lamborghini and all this other crap going on. Well, if you've bootstrapped a business from the ground up and built it yourself without a whole bunch of other help or partners or whatever, you'll know and figure out really, really, really quickly that that's not how life really is. And which is fine, but at least it gives the person a little bit of honest feedback and some honest things to look into in a different perspective to maybe put on the radar if it was never on the radar before. I mean, if you listen to me versus Tony Robbins, it's a little bit different.
And it should be. You have a unique story compared to Tony Robbins, there's a lot of business minds and a lot of business podcasts and shows out there. And I think my one critique on a lot of them is that they sell the dream, but very few shows are willing to get into the weeds with you and get into the dirt a little bit and talk about, the stuff that didn't work. And help you see, like, yes, sell the future. Being a business owner can be incredible, but if you expect it to be, Lamborghinis and beach houses right out of the gate, you're in for a rude awakening, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, well, and also too that going into business sometimes changes people. So when you look at even a mechanic shop that says they're honest and they have integrity or whatnot, and this is kind of any business in my opinion. Yeah, it could start like that because we started it going, we like to help people. We like to fix people's problems. We like to fix this and whatever. But then that business side kicks in and goes, it makes your prices, you have to grow, you have to increase them, because everything gets more expensive and you now have more bills and, stuff like that. And so that's when, sometimes there's two ways to go. Is either sometimes those people that are honest, that had integrity there, take the wrong turn and they think they're doing it, but actually they're not being honest, integrity driven at that point. Or they build their systems and everything to, okay, if I have to charge more, I'm going to do more and produce more and give more and, make it, instead of cooking this steak, bump up the steak price a little bit different plate to offer it, make it look more expensive and feel like they're getting a better deal. And so that's the hard part, that's because it's not just do this. There's never, we use this term in our shop all the time. It's never just, I don't know how many times we like, dude, we just need to do an oil change and it turns into a freaking fiasco. And, just do this. It's like, it's never just, especially on the business side. It's never just, you don't just raise your prices. When you do that, you have to do this. And so that's that. And that's where a lot of people don't talk about is the chain of events that really happen. In the automotive side, they typically say, oh man, you got to have this percent, and then you got to market parts up here and this. Okay. All right. Yeah, I understand the concept, but every shop is different. What are the foundation principles that I need to do to increase this up here? What skills do I need? My service advisors need different skills to be able to sell up here, And so there's a lot of adjustments that have to be made.
And I think it's worth noting too that everybody is in business for a slightly different reason. Some businesses might want to grow profit, and we all need to make profit as business owners, but that might be their sole reason for being in business is money. Other people go into business because they want to give back to their local communities and they really want to do a lot of charity work and elevate their status. Some people go into business because they like helping people and they have a skill and they just hated doing it for other people. And I think that generic blanket advice, to your point, it doesn't fit for every shop. And to go back to your statement about it's never just, I think for listeners on the show, it's never just, today's show. I want to open it up for you, if you're willing, to share a way for people to connect with you and a way for people to hear more and learn more than we have time to get into on today's show. What's a good way for people to connect with you and for them to do that?
I mean, get on Facebook, they send me a message and, I can respond there. I'm trying to, part of my working on the business type mentality, am I trying to get more on social media Yes, absolutely. And there's even, I have an email. You can go on the website and stuff like that. So no matter what offends or butts, if you ask to talk to me, one of my team is going to be like, hey, call this person. And I mean, will it take me a week to get back? Yeah, but I'll get back to you. Just like when I say I'll call you right back on my phone. I didn't tell you when, but I will. I won't forget that. So yeah, I'm hoping to, especially as I'm changing and doing all the working on the company, and after getting my ass kicked all these years on this, I'm could I turn it to something good and help people? Absolutely. So I love doing this, and I appreciate you guys having me on, and hopefully I can do this more, and hopefully I can be a valuable, birdie in their ear for some people to help them out.
Absolutely. And, with that, I just want to say a huge thank you again for being on the show and for taking the time to have the conversation, for having the willingness to want to share some of the business insights that you've learned over the 15 years that you've been doing this. And it really means a lot, I think, for our listeners and even the lurkers out there and the people who just listen and are at a stage in life where they want to consume. And I just appreciate you taking that time.
Pleasure.
And for anybody who is out there listening, if you got value from this conversation and you want to hear more conversations like this, share it with another shop owner. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Review the show on whatever platform you're listening to it on. It does help people find the show. It also helps people find you in your shops when you get reviews. We're no different. So I'd like to tell you, if you're enjoying this, subscribe, engage with us. We'd love to have a conversation. If you're looking for marketing help or marketing resources, obviously reach out to us at honestmechanicmarketing.com. And most importantly, thank you for listening to the show. As always, keep it honest in the garage.
Not saying it's not chaotic, but now it's controlled. It's a controlled chaos. You know what you're getting into. Everybody has a good idea what's going on. And that was huge for us. Just having those quick, 5 minutes. It doesn't take long. Everybody's involved, front of the house, back of the house. And we sit down and we talk about what we got going on for the day. So we have, all my techs are enrolled, and being that we're myself enrolled in Shop Fix, so all my techs are enrolled in Tech Fix. So that's something that they're on, weekly, especially the greener guys, they're on it. The more seasoned guys that we have in the shop, they're constantly, I wouldn't say this part of it's not very structured, but they're always these guys are always shadowing them.